Welcome to 9/11 plus 19. 19 years, it's hard to believe. First of all, and there's the newspaper there. I actually have three from that day or the day after, and I preserved them. It's a little hobby. Been preserving newspapers really since the 90s, eventful ones. First of all, my condolences goes out to everyone associated there, from the people that passed away that day, that were injured, their families, the people that tried to help out and got ill and passed away and are sick as I speak 19 years later. A very tragic day, and I'm just going to give you my little story. You may or may not like it, but never did a video on 9/11, and I've watched literally at least 1,000 probably, because yes, I've gone down the rabbit hole and I've watched the pros and cons, the conspiracies. It goes on and on. I could do a 2-hour video if I wanted to, but it's very easy to look up yourself. Although a lot of stuff is taken off YouTube in the last few years, so it's harder and harder to find things. I have a couple clips at the end, and I really had to search for the very last clip for at least 45 minutes before I could find anything on it. But that'll be at the end. But that day had gotten up early with the kids to put them on the bus, give them their breakfast, and the Hannah was awake too. And usually she was the one doing it, and I was the one still sleeping in bed. But I got up that day. Off and on, I'd get up with them. And my gut, I believe in your gut feeling, your gut instinct, your little voice in your head. Was watching that and thinking, the tragedy of the people in the building, but yet thinking, well, how are they going to put out that fire? And when the first building fell down, I was in shock and amazement, thinking, how is that possible that a building like that could fall? And then the second building fell, and I was even more shocked, thinking, my gut was telling me there's something more than meets the eye here. Intuition, whatever. And I always tell my kids, even like whatever, if they're in a situation and they get a little intuition or they feel a funny feeling, whatever, act on it, because that's probably the correct thing to do. Is don't ignore that in any situation. But anyway, so I went to work that day. I was working second shift, and then found out building 7 had fallen. And at the point, I didn't know what was going on. I thought another plane had hit it. And later that night, I found out it just fell down from being on fire. And I won't go down all the theories, because it would be a forever long video. But that was also an almost impossible thing that could happen. But so my gut to this day, 19 years later, tells me we don't know everything that happened. Whether it was who was involved or how did the buildings come down, which is sad. So hopefully someday, maybe plus 20, plus 25, who knows, we will find out more about this. And this is a little ignorance round, so hopefully we don't stay ignorant. That's a Silver Shield special there I got a few years ago. I got 2. I left this one out to tone, and boy, it didn't tone too good, did it? But it shows the ball and chain symbolizing debt, and in the Federal Trust, and it shows the woman, the risque Lady Liberty, holding her cell phone as the trade centers are on fire and not seeming to pay attention. So they were interesting rounds. So I picked up a couple years ago when they came out. So you'll see 2 clips now, and somebody else had a gut feeling on that day. They changed it 2 days later. I don't know why you would change your gut feeling. I still have my gut feeling 19 years later. And then the last video, I hope they keep that promise. Although it wasn't really a promise. It was just something he said. But that would be nice. Although I will be voting for that person, because once again, he's the better of 2 evils, in my opinion. Not that he's evil. I think he's trying, but I think he's limited on what he can do and say. which maybe all the presidents since Kennedy have been, but that's another video. So God bless. Once again, my condolences on this day of infamy, as I said about Pearl Harbor. Wishing everyone all the best, and take care. God bless.
There was an architectural defect. You know, the World Trade Center was always known as a very, very strong building. Don't forget, that took a big bomb in the basement. Now, the basement is the most vulnerable place because it's your foundation, and it withstood that. And I got to see that area about 3 or 4 days after it took place because one of my structural engineers actually took me for a tour because he did the building. And I said, I can't believe it. The building was standing solid, and half of the columns were blown out. And so this was an unbelievably powerful building. If you know anything about structure, it was one of the first buildings that was built from the outside. The steel, the reason the World Trade Center had such narrow windows is that in between all the windows you had the steel on the outside. You had the steel on the outside of the building. That's why when I first looked, and you had big, heavy I-beams, when I first looked at it, I couldn't believe it because there was a hole in the steel. And this is steel that was, you remember the width of the windows of the World Trade Center, folks. I think you know, if you were ever up there, they were quite narrow. And in between was this heavy steel. I said, how could a plane, even a 767 or 747, or whatever it might have been, how could it possibly go through the steel? I happen to think that they had not only a plane, but they had bombs that exploded almost simultaneously, because I just can't imagine anything being able to go through that wall. Most buildings are built with the steel is on the inside around the elevator shaft. This one was built from the outside, which is the strongest structure you can have, and it was almost just like a can of soup.
You know, Donald, we were looking at pictures all morning long of that plane coming into building number 2, and when you see that approach the far side, and then all of a sudden, within a matter of a millisecond, the explosion pops out the other side.
I just think that it was a plane with more than just fuel. I think.
In all fairness, we went after Iraq. They did not knock down the World Trade Center. Okay? It wasn't the Iraqis that knocked down the World Trade Center. We went after Iraq. We decimated the country. Iran's taken over. Okay. But it wasn't the Iraqis. You will find out who really knocked down the World Trade Center because they have papers over there that are very secret. You may find it's the Saudis, okay? But you will find out.